Luke 9:23 if you'd like. Luke 9:23. Many, many years ago, back when many of us were youngsters in elementary school, maybe junior high school, they told us the story of the Dutch officer that bought Manhattan Island from the native people for $24 worth of glass beads and trinkets. Historians debate a little bit of the details of that story, but it pretty much stands. Some say it was $1,000 worth of glass beads and trinkets. I'll let you make your own choice there. But my point is, people can be swindled out of extremely valuable things for things that are literally worthless. And Satan is trying to swindle us out of our eternity for things that are totally worthless. And that's the direction we're going to be heading after I restart the computer, because it has shut off. This is grace under stress. Well, that reboots for a moment. In Luke 9:23, he tells us, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. So what we're looking at is Satan is trying to get us to find a shortcut. And I'm not finding a shortcut. Come on, computer. There you are. You know, you set this thing up first thing in the morning, you think you got it going. Love our technology, right? Let's try it there. This is, incidentally, Satan trying to distract you from the importance of this lesson. It'd like to get you all tied up in technology going, oh, God didn't have it down. Look, if anybody wants to come after Christ, you got to take up your cross and follow Him. The way to heaven is not a short little nice breezy ride that you're going to get on some fluffy Sunday afternoon. And what Satan does to us is he brings in distractions. And they're just all over the place nowadays. I'm not against social media, but I think social media has been one of Satan's greatest inventions. Now, I want to take you back further than just your phone you're holding, and we all have our phone, but go back all the way to the days of radio. When families were so excited, they would take big chunks of their time just to sit around the radio and listen to the Grand Ole Opry, for example. And then many of us remember Paul Harvey and the rest of the story. And those were all fine things. They were good moral things. But the distraction just became more and more and more. And then we had TV come along, and TV just started taking more and more of our time. And then we had the computer, the internet, and now we've got it all in the palm of our hand. And if they are correct, what you hold in the palm of your hand is a greater computer capability than what took man to the moon. We'll let that one soak in for a moment, and we have daily access to it without a second thought. And Satan is taking all of the beads and trinkets of social media, saying, no, you need to place your attention here. This is where the real stuff is. And he's cheating us out of our eternity for that $24 worth of glass beads and trinkets. Ephesians 5:15, he says, be careful how you walk. On into verse 16, he says, redeem the time. Because time is the thing that we really have. Time is the currency of our discipleship. Where you're spending your time says so much about your discipleship. Now, there's a lot to flesh out there. We won't go into all of that right now. But Matthew 6:19, he would say, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, but rather store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Those are the true riches, the ones that we lay up in heaven. And Satan is trying to keep you from storing up those true riches by any little distraction, any little delay, any little diversion he can. And I will say that the diversion does not have to be immoral. All Satan has to do is get you distracted from laying up the treasure in heaven. And if you're doing something other, then Satan's okay with that, because you're not laying up treasures in heaven. That's the one thing he's trying to keep you from doing. So I want us to ask ourselves, are we accepting Satan's offer? He says, I've got something better for you. I got something real right now. Look at all these shiny little beans and baubles and what I have. Has that caught our eye? Are we done as Colossians 3:1 and 2 said, manage to set our mind on heaven and look at things above? That is the challenge for us as disciples. And as our heading says, Sunday isn't a test. It is awesome that you're sitting on a pew and you've taken this time out to worship God and remember His death, burial, resurrection, and study more of His Word. But this isn't the test. You know what I've said in times past? This is the break. This ought to be the pep rally. This is where we'll come off the battlefield for a while and rest. If we're on the battlefield in here, we got a problem. This is not the battlefield. The battlefield's Monday through Saturday when we're out there dealing with real life. So it's more than attendance. Attendance is important. Hebrews 10:25 would be a great verse for that one. But what Christ is looking for is people that actually follow Him. Luke 6:46, you know the verse. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do the things that I say? He's looking for people who do the will of the Father. That would be your Matthew 7:21. That's what He's wanting. So we look at attendance and we go, yeah, but my attendance is really good. And I'm like, that's a star. That's a piece of the puzzle. But that isn't the whole proof. Because in Revelation 3:1, the church at Sardis had a reputation that they were alive, that they were really a good church. And Christ said, no, you're dead. And if you get on down to the lukewarm church there, verse 15, 16, 17, right in there, you find out also that even though they're a moral people, He said, I'm going to spew them out because they're lukewarm. Attendance, again, is a piece of the puzzle. It is a part of what we do as disciples. But if it's the only thing we're doing, or if it's the majority of what we're doing, then we're missing a whole lot of what goes on. I think we like attendance because it's easy to count. And it is easy to count. Many of us would have to sit long and hard to think about the last time we missed because it's been so long we missed, so we can count our attendance, go, yeah, I make Sunday morning, I make Wednesday, I make my meetings, this. And it's real easy to count. Us men especially love things we can count, little boxes we can check off. But when you look at Matthew 6:33, where He says, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, we go, well, that's a little abstract, preacher. I'm on the pew, isn't that it? Well, that's part of it. But what about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and on through Saturday? And that's where, as the old timers would say, the rubber meets the pavement. That's where we find out what we're really doing. So church is important. And I love the meme that says, let church be the reason you miss everything else. And let us who are, can I call us old timers? Not all of you get to qualify for old timers. But you remember when churches would be full? Remember when they would not have a ball game on Saturday or would not have a ball game on Wednesday because people were going to church? And now people are traveling and doing everything they want because Sunday's my only free day. You got to let church be the reason you miss everything else. Christ has to be number one. He has to be at the top of the list. He has to be over everything. Are we saying you can't do something else? Absolutely not. We are saying it's about priorities. And we understand priorities. We don't need a long lesson on priorities. So if I'm going to love my wife as Christ loved the church, then among all the physical people I know, she's going to be my priority. Does that mean I cannot talk to somebody else? Does that mean I can't go run around with my buddies and do something else if my wife's not there? Well, of course it doesn't mean that. I can go do other things with other people a lot of times. I like to think about going and doing things with grandkids a lot of times. You get how it is if you're a grandparent. But who gets priority? Who gets top billing? And when things have to be rearranged on the schedule, who gets the top place and who gets rearranged? And so when we're talking about Christ being the priority, we're not saying you can't go do other things, you can't travel, you can't do this and that. We're saying He always maintains that priority spot. And if something else can be moved and shifted, then it's moved and shifted. Are there things that cannot be moved? Absolutely. Who would argue with Sister Kay today not being here? Not a single one of us, because there are things in life that just hit so hard we have to attend to them when we have to attend to them. I don't think playing baseball is one of those things. I hope you follow what I'm saying. So discipleship, it gets us down to our daily attention. And I think this makes it hard because you're going to weave it into everything you do all day long. This is not, we're not going to assemble every single day. How many of you want to listen to me do a sermon 7 days a week? I don't want to preach that many sermons, but I'm pretty sure you don't want to have to listen to that many either. So most of our disciples, what happens is they just die by distraction. They're good people, they're moral people, and we know a lot of good moral people. But that doesn't make them godly. I believe that's another mistake that we sometimes make. We think everybody that's good must be going to heaven. No, the only ones going to heaven are those who do the will of the Father. And just because somebody is good doesn't make them right with God. We don't believe in self-salvation. We believe salvation comes through doing the will of the Father, not through being so good God's just got to take us into heaven. And so disciples get distracted by a whole lot of things. We used to tell the story of the guy who said, now, as soon as I get my kids in school, I'm going to start church. Well, now that the kids are in school, there's a lot of activities. But just as soon as they get in junior and senior high and don't need me around so much, then I'll get in church. Well, they've got all these ball games we want to go to, and as soon as they get off into college and they're out of my life, then I'll go to church. Well, they just got married, and I really need to help them with what they're doing. And as soon as they get established, then I'll start going to church, and then along come the grandkids. You get the idea. And there's always a distraction. Were any of the distractions I mentioned overtly immoral? Absolutely not. In fact, every distraction I mentioned is a pretty common part of life. And yet, it doesn't have to be a spiritually detrimental distraction. There's a way to manage and balance all of that, and that's where the true disciples come shining through. So we have a lot of folks have a lot of good intentions, and that paves the road to run. One of these days I'm going to Someday Isle. And Someday Isle is a really dangerous place to live. So we get down to it, nobody can do it for us. I got to do it for me. I can encourage, I can admonish, I can rebuke. I can get real loud sometimes and get so excited, which is pretty rare, that if you're sitting on the front row, I might spit on you almost. You know how it goes. But I can't do it for you. Nobody can do it for you. Whether somebody comes up beside you and puts an arm around you and talks soft in a whisper in a gentle voice, or they get in your face and they're really drill instructor kind of mentality, still can't do it for you. After it's all over, you got to walk away and make your own choice. What will I do with that information? So we focus on today, Matthew 6:34. After he said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, then that's where he says, don't worry about tomorrow. You worry about today. Tomorrow's got enough struggles of its own. Let me read that, be sure I get it right. Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will care for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Amen and amen. You focus on today, getting through today. And if you live to see tomorrow, then we'll just focus on getting through tomorrow also. But nobody can do it for you. You got to do it. Others can cheer you on. Others can give you pointers and tips and information and ideas. And we are so blessed in that capacity that there is so much information out there now that if you have a problem, there are different, I want to say hundreds, if not thousands of people who've had exactly the same problem you have, and they've had the kindness to share it with us on the internet, whether it be a podcast, a YouTube, or a blog where you get to read it, but the information is there. And then you can extrapolate from that information what fine-tunes to your life better, and you can live life, but only you can live your life, and you can only do it today. No one can live tomorrow, and no one can live it for you. It's just the way it works. Now I'm going to go off on just a little bit of a rant. I won't stay long. One of our biggest challenges is to go find those sources. They're there. They're crazy there. They're all over the place. And people are, well, I'm too busy. I just really don't want, and they start making excuses. And they don't realize it, but they did exactly what Satan wanted them to do. There is information out there today that will make your life better today and tomorrow and the next day. But if Satan can keep you in the and whining and backpedaling, who won? Who just took the glass beads and the trinkets and exchanged it for real life? That's pretty harsh, but that's the reality. I like the way Dr. Phil always said it, like you set it up. So someday that is Satan's little chest of glass beads, and people are buying it. One of these days I'm going to start reading my Bible. One of these days I'm going to pray more. One of these days I'm going to get to visiting folks. One of these days I'm going to do a daily devotion. One of these days I'm going to start watching my diet. One of these days I'm going to go to the gym. One of these days I'm going to learn to meditate on whatever's good, lovely, and good report. One. Satan is happy. He is delighted to hear us say, someday I'm gonna. Because he knows, as long as we're saying, someday I'm going to, then I'm not doing it today. And today's the only day I can do anything in. And so he's delighted because he knows he won another day. We just took another little glass bead out of the chest. So we focus just one step at a time. That's all you do. You just focus one step at a time. And let me give you, I hope this is a little bit of encouragement, but as I say, there's just tons of information out there. There is. And narrowing it down is a little bit of the challenge. Just take a step. Read a blog. And if that blog had 2 sentences in it that applied to you, then highlight them, mark them down, put them in your note, however you want to do it, and then go on and find the next one. And then go on and find the next one. And they go on to find the next one. If you'll do that for 365 days, you'll have a lot more information. But if you just sit around for the next 365 days and whine, I can't, it's too overwhelming, I just don't get it, I don't know how to figure it out. Guess where you're going to be in 365 days? In the same place or worse. Convenience ends when discipleship begins, because discipleship does not pamper the flesh. It is not supposed to pamper the flesh. 2 Timothy 2, 3, and 4. Let's turn over and read this one. 2 Timothy 2, 3, and 4. Suffer hardships with me as a good soldier of Christ Jesus. No soldier in active service entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life so that he may please the one who enlisted him as a soldier. Does it sound like we're out to pamper the flesh? We absolutely are not. It is not about convenience. Matthew 16:24 is another occasion where Christ said, if you want to follow me, take up your cross. Some translations, depending on which chapter, which gospel you're looking in, say take up your cross daily and follow after me. So it's a daily grind. And you have to learn to love the process. Now, again, not a hard concept in general, but it is a little difficult to apply spiritually. So I'm going to do a little side illustration first, and that is the kids at karate. The kids at karate, some of those kids, they don't want to be there. Their mama's making them go, and you can tell they don't want to be there. And every time you start a little instruction or something, you can see they're just way off and never land somewhere. It's so obvious, but they think you can't tell, right? And then there are kids who love the sport, and they want to be good at it, and they want to be the best they can be, and they're in there to learn, and they ask questions and they interact. That's all we're talking about. You learn to love the process. Do you want to fish? Do you ever watch a fishing show? You ever watch a fishing show so you can learn to fish better? That's what we're talking about. You want to cook? And you want to cook better, and you want that meal that when everybody pushes back from the table, number one, they all need a nap because they're so full, and they're all saying, "Whoa, that's so good. That was a great meal." And so what do? You love the process, and you watch cooking shows. over and over and over, looking for different ideas. That's all we're talking about. So you fall in love with the idea of being the best disciple you can be, and you study those things that have to do with discipleship. And you do it over and over, and you listen to people, and you listen to some people and go, no, that really doesn't apply to me. And you listen to somebody else and go, oh, wait a minute. There's something there I can learn. And you just keep the process going. You're in love with the process, the daily grind. Not so much a daily grind because you're enjoying the process. 1 Corinthians 9:27, we quote it all the time. I discipline my body. I bring it into subjection. That's what we're talking about. We've got to do it to ourselves. It is very much a do-it-yourself project. Now, God gave us the manual, but we have to do it. And I think a whole lot of people would do it if we could give it in a pill. But if you can't give it in a pill, nah, they don't want it. Hebrews 12:1 tells us to lay aside all the weights that so easily ensnare us. And again, this is just Satan drawing us over, going, no, 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 come over here and look at NASCAR a while. No, 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 you need to go chase this team over here. You need to go do this thing here. You need to fall in love with some other project so I can consume more and more of your time pursuing earthly things so that you get distracted from the heavenly things. And that's what he's trying to do. Our challenge isn't Sunday. You're here. I know your challenge isn't Sunday. Now look at all the empty pews. Obviously, Sunday is a challenge for some people, but it's not your challenge. Our challenge, my challenge, is Monday through Saturday. Managing my time and doing the things that need to be done. We're going to do most of what we do in the small, unseen places. Let's call it the wilderness of isolation if you want. That might be a good idea. Bring back some about what Christ did for us. Matthew 6:1 tells us, beware of doing our things so that other people will see us. This isn't not about getting an applause or an audience around us as we do our training. What we're looking at is what we're going to do when nobody else is around. What do you do in private? What do you watch in private? What do you talk about in private? Where's your mind going when it's just you? Those kind of things. That's really what counts. The training that we're in is usually a lot of private stuff. Or maybe I should use the word semi-private. So how many days of the week are you around every single day, all of the brethren that assemble here throughout Sunday morning? Never. Me, for my most part, I could count about 5 or 6 of you that I may see during the week. Now, Sharon, I get to see her every day, but I don't even see the kids and grandkids every day. So most of my life is lived in a very private place where very few people see me. In fact, sometimes nobody sees me. What are we doing in that time? Where are we focusing? What are we chasing? Matthew 6:6, he tells us, when you pray, go in your closet to pray. This isn't about being seen. It isn't about parading down the street as, being all that great and awesome. It's the unseen places. That's your proving ground. And all the greats and all of the areas that we count greatness, whether you want to think sports or entertainment or what have you, they did all their training in the unseen. Think about it. When some singer puts on a massive concert in front of 50,000 people and they're on the stage for an hour, a half, or 2, how many hours do you think's behind that? There are countless hours of practice and preparation. And if you follow them all the way back to when they were a kid and had their dream and said, one of these days I'm going to be on stage singing, there's countless hours involved in that. So you work at it. You work at it in the private time over and over and over again, and you don't just stumble into godliness. So it's not just emotions, it's obedience. You want to get to the obedient point. You want to feel that, the feelings aren't a proof of spirituality. You want to know that you're doing what God said you needed to do. John 14:15, if you love me, he said, you'll keep my commandments. And I think emotionalism is a common flaw that we run into. I think a lot of people think, well, I really feel good about Jesus. Now stop and pause on that one a second. Do you know people outside of the church who may have never even darkened the doors of a church, who say, and I've had to say this to me, now me and God, we're good. They felt good about God. They had a nice emotional experience with God, But they weren't doing anything God said. They weren't studying. They weren't sowing the seed. They weren't doing, they had this emotional little fuzzy feeling. And they thought, well, if I had an emotional fuzzy feeling, I must be good. Well, maybe, or maybe you just needed a Rolade. I'm not really sure there. Romans 12:1, he says, I urge you to present your body as a living sacrifice. I urge you to do this. It's not emotionalism. And then he says we crucify the flesh. If we belong to Christ, we crucify the flesh. That means we're going to subject it. Or to use Paul's word, we're going to discipline our body, bring it into subjection. So emotions, totally the wrong map. We do want to feel good, but the emotions are not the map. Bible's the map. Psalms 119, 105, that's our map. And then we rejoice when we realize we are following the map. And then we take our strength in fellowship, because we do need some fellowship. I know we get to feeling isolated sometimes and all alone. Hebrews 10:24 tells us to consider one another in order to stir up love and good works. And then he goes on to say, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. And that's what we need. We need church family. God knew what he was doing when he brought us together. So in the Proverbs 27:17, it says iron sharpens iron, and we sharpen one another. We got to be together. And I'm going to tell you something that's a little bit tougher to swallow. But sometimes if we're going to sharpen one another, we got to rub each other the wrong way. But we have this concept of church is always supposed to be sweet and pleasant. Everybody's supposed to be nice, and nobody's supposed to say anything I don't want to hear or anything I don't like, and they're never, ever supposed to offend me. Pray tell, if that's the truth, then how are we ever going to sharpen one another? If you've ever taken out a file and sharpened the lawnmower blade, or used a whetstone and sharpened your kitchen knife, it's got to do some contact. And there's got to be some rubbing, if you know what I mean. Now, it's got to be the right way, I'll give you that. But this is part of it. We're human. Isn't it funny? You got a married couple, and they have 50, 60 happy years of marriage together, and you ask them, do y'all ever disagree? Sure, they disagreed over the years. But they didn't call it quits, did they? Why is it that some people play strike one with church? Strike one, you're out. I don't like the way these people behave. I'm out of here. Man, if we did everybody that way, we'd all be hermits living in a cave somewhere. There are blind spots in my life I will never ever see all by myself. I need somebody to get in my face now and then, or to whisper to me, or send me a note, or just suggest something. I don't care how you do it, but how are you always, you just can't see you perfectly. Oh, we think we do, but somebody else has a whole different perspective. It's kind of funny. And it's kind of funny, too, because, you get to know somebody, and some people go, oh, I think they're just so mean, and you know them, and think, I think they're one of the most lovable people I know. It's funny how all of that works together. So Romans 12:15 would tell us to rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. That is where our church family comes together, and we do need that strength. And when somebody has something to be happy about, we need to be happy with them. And when something sad happens, we need to be sad with them. That's called sharing life together. That's exactly what that is. So it's not just sitting in a pew watching a sermon. It's sharing our struggles, our victories, our life. And I know some of y'all did this yesterday, and I'm going to include this in the church family thing, though this is a rather trivial example. Some of you wept together yesterday as the football game came to an end without the score you wanted, right? But wasn't it fun to be with people who shared the same ideals that you did and that kind of thing? So it can be very, very serious, such as what Sister Kay's going through right now. And it can just be those other times, where we just sit around and shake our head. And sometimes we need to sit around and have a cup of coffee and talk about the things that we can't process, like the shooting of Charlie Kirk. How do you even process that stuff? And not just that one. There's all kinds of cases. And so that's our struggling side together. And then sometimes it's just happy stuff. That's what we need church family for all those things. So if you walk by your feelings, if you walk and you feel lonely, I kind of messed that up, didn't I? Maybe time to step in a little closer. Now and then, we'll get folks that think, well, it's kind of a cold church. Well, we are if you stand on the margins and out in the periphery. I'll agree with that. But if you'll get in where all the people meet and where we get together and where we talk and where the ladies have their ladies' lunch and the men have their men's lunch and we meet at hospitals or funeral homes or wherever else we happen to go out on whatever this Tuesday when we go help Martindale celebrate his, I think, 93rd birthday. Did you see? The people who look at us and go, I don't know about them people. They're not involved in those events. They're off somewhere else doing something else. I can't make them do it. But if you deliberately step in, then you find out some things. So be careful here. Satan has a little cheap chest of beads and trinkets, and he's trying to distract you. Question is, are you going to make the trade? You can't drift uphill into heaven. And all you've got is today. And I'm going to say that just a little bit longer than I normally would. Kay's son-in-law was 54. Everybody was sitting watching TV, turning in for the night. And he said, I'm going to stay up a little later watching TV. Nothing wrong. And the next morning, they find him that he's gone. 54. Wow. They got to rattle your cage. Make you think. All you got is today. And he's a big old healthy guy. And then all of a sudden, it's over. Don't trade it off for some elusive tomorrow, someday. One of these days I'm gonna. Because every time you say one of these days, Satan just got another point. Just scored another point. Today's. So Satan's offering, this is a good transition here. So Satan's offering you your glass beads and trinkets. What will your answer be? If it hadn't been the right answer, we can help you publicly. Let us do so while we stand and sing.